Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. Whoever does not believe will be condemned. You know, St. Paul probably in his conversion, didn't want to believe in this Jesus guy, but then probably thought, I might want to take a closer look. There's something Brother Mark and I have talked about often called Pascal's wager. And if you haven't heard this, it's quite fascinating in the most simplest of terms. Basically, you are wagering your eternal fate. Your entire eternal destiny, you are wagering on whether or not you believe in Jesus or not. So that's called Pascal's wager. He was the guy who came up with this. So basically, you're wagering everything on whether or not you believe in Jesus. Now, if you believe Jesus exists and you are right, you have everything to gain and nothing to lose if you're wrong, because you're no different than if you didn't believe. So in other words, if you believe in Jesus and you are right and Jesus really exists, you have everything to gain, and if you are wrong, you have nothing to lose. But if you believe Jesus does not exist and you are right, you've got nothing to gain. But if you're wrong, you've got everything to lose. So if you were to present that to a betting man, choice A or choice B, there's not a betting man in this world that wouldn't take the first one. Because you got basically everything to gain and nothing to lose. And in the other one, you got nothing to gain and everything to lose. Why would you go with the second one? And that's what I think St. Paul, in some of our ways, has done. He's basically saying, I'm going to wager my future, my existence, my being on this Jesus. In this passage, we have probably the most famous conversion story in history. And no, it's not Father Don Calloway, as you've heard me say before. This is the most famous conversion story in history. And we've said before that many have said we would not have a church today without St. Paul. St. Paul is, for me, one of my absolute favorites and inspirations, because despite all his faults, despite his mistakes, despite his big mouth, God used him for one reason. He had zeal. God can take you, even if you aren't the most holiest person, even if you aren't you haven't found yet the way to live the most virtuous life, if you've got zeal, God can say, you know what? I can use that zeal, even though you're using it in the wrong direction, and Paul was completely in the wrong direction. I can use that zeal for me. But you gotta have zeal. That's why the scriptures teach us, don't be lukewarm. That's the worst. I don't care. I don't give a crud. Jesus says, I will spew the lukewarm from my mouth. I'd rather you hot or cold. Zeal. Have passion for what is happening in our faith and what we are given. You know, of the 27 books of the New Testament, 14 of them, over half, are attributed to St. Paul. And, this story really here is, I learned in seminary, it's not just really a sudden conversion. We call it a conversion, but it's really a sudden surrender. Because I can convert and then still want to do it my way. Paul surrendered, which is one step beyond conversion. Many of us convert. I reverted. Brother Alex, today's his birthday, he reverted. But now the question is, do we surrender? God chose Paul, and I said before, and I think myself in terms of heading in the wrong direction because of zeal. You could have everything else wrong, but God can work with that. But if you just have that zeal. It was funny because Paul intended to enter Damascus with this fury, sword drawn, I'm going to slay the Christians. Instead, he was led by the hand, blind and helpless. Surrender. Only till we come to our misery do we recognize our need for God's mercy. Absolute, utter misery.